Hi, everyone. Happy Earth Week. Today at March for Science, we are continuing the celebration by airing a host of events and interviews celebrating democracy. My name is Ingrid Paredes. I am the satellite director for March for Science, as well as satellite organizer myself here in New York City. And I'm super excited for all the conversations we have today, highlighting scientists and advocates who are fighting for science around the globe. And today, for this conversation, we have joining us Dr. Amy Sharma from Sci4GA. So please welcome to the stage, Amy. How are you doing, Amy?
Great. How are you all doing today?
I'm doing well. Yeah, it's a little cold here in New York. It was like we got hit with a random storm yesterday, and it went from like 70 degrees, beautiful spring weather, to like 38 degrees. But
yeah, it is that cold here in Georgia today, and no one knows what's happening. It's very confusing. So now I'm going to be stuck with those lame jokes about there's no such thing as global warming, right? You know, whenever those people at the grocery store that you're like, thank you.
Yeah, great. I actually just learned this phrase the other day from Catherine Hayhoe, who's like a political scientist at Texas Tech, and she calls it global weirding instead, just to get people on the same page. And, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be 90 degrees every day.
I love that. I'm going to start using that. Let's try and make that a thing. I love it.
Definitely. So yeah, thanks again so much for today, joining us this morning. Can you tell us more about yourself, more about the work that your organization does?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really glad to be here. I am the Vice President of Science for Georgia. And so what we're working to do is bridge the gap between science and the public. We really want to make science matter. And so we do that by helping scientists improve their communication skills and then providing them we take people on a journey from like passive science learner to like active science advocate, right? So first we teach them how to like understand the science and explain it in human terms. And then we give them like low key kind of no pressure events to interact with normal humans. And then, we heard from a lot of people that, they were like, I want to advocate. And their advice that they always get back is just go do it. And you're like, well, that's not helpful, right? So like, we provide them things like letter writing events and like days at the Capitol and like here's how to write a good letter and things like that. So that way they feel very comfortable and like ease their way into advocacy because, we're scientists and we really don't like to do anything without an instruction booklet. And we want to make the barrier to entry like as low as possible. So that way they're like, yeah, I can do this. Demystify our legislative representatives, right? Like they're just people. They're very nice. Like, well, some of them are not good people, but like a vast majority, even if you disagree with them politically, like when you sit down and have a conversation with them, they are like human beings that aren't just gonna like stab you in the eye. So like it's really good to demystify that and be like your representative will talk to you. So that's Science for Georgia. And then personally I do cross stitching and beer brewing. Those were my two COVID hobbies.
That's great. Okay, I'm a chemical engineer, so I definitely would love at some point to talk to you about beer brewing.
Absolutely.
I'm trying to get into, but just haven't yet. Yeah. But yeah, I think you brought up such an important point about like making communication, particularly around like science and technical information, more accessible. Like having studied STEM myself, I always felt like when I was telling my friends about science, it's different when it comes from like when it's like friend to friend, like I'm just like, like doing homework next to you, we're just having a conversation. And I feel like those conversations always led to more interest and kind of like awareness for what I was doing. But if I just like showed my friend, like, here's my thermodynamics problem set today, they're just like, what am I supposed to do with this? This is so scary.
Right. Yeah. Not only is it scary, it's like inaccessible, and they're like, I don't think what's, and even like, yeah, they're like, what is, and how does this relate to me, right? Like that's also the other thing, right? Because you're like, thermodynamics is really important, but like taking that down to a level where someone's like, oh, that's how it affects my life, right? Like that's really the thing that we always forget when we're in the weeds. So
yeah, how did you get into science advocacy? How did your stitching all tie in?
How does this happen? Right. So, oh wow. So how did I get into this personally? When I was in grad school in the early 2000s. I'm not going to tell you when, because I've just realized that I'm hiring people that were born after 2000.
Okay, that's a lot for even me. So that's
Yeah. So, right. So anyways, I've become that guy. But so when I was in grad school, it was during I realized I was not going to be a professor. Like that was just out, right? And so then I found the AAAS Science and Technology Policy Fellowship. And so I went to do that because I'm way better at connecting people to science and than I am like sitting in a lab, like titrating pipettes and things like that. And so that was a good start into it. And it was during the second Bush, and I'm not that old. It was during the Bush administration. And a lot of people were like really angry about like what was going on with the environment and with our science policy. And I'm a big believer that like, you can't just sit around and complain about it, right? Like we have to do something. So in order to do something, we have to learn how to do it, right? So I had this fellowship to like learn how to work with the government and learn how to advocate effectively. And then I've just kind of gone from there. And then I joined Science for Georgia in 2019. That sounds about right. They had Science for Georgia grew out of the March for Science, right? Like we hosted the one in Atlanta in 2017 and 2018 and 2019. So just, and it was people that were like, okay, we're here. We really want to get something done. Now that we've put the signs down and we marched, like what next? Like, how do we carry this momentum forward? And so that's really the origin story of Science for Georgia is, like there was a group of people that were like, well, that was fun, but I want to keep this going. So.
Yeah, I relate to that a lot. Here in the city, it was very similar. There was like a big group that organized it. We did like the 2018 March, and it was like really fun, really big. We had like very similar, I think like philosophy with Science for Georgia, where our motto is educate to empower, where we link people with like scientific information, really like low key events, even if it's just like, like a little science demo that maybe like your kid wants to check out, but then that ropes you into a conversation with like a physicist who designed it, all this, all that. And eventually like you're thinking about like, oh, this is part of my everyday life. This is a part of our decision making at every scale. And I think it just starts to like low key in that way, like you said, like integrate into your mindset, which I think is like the best way to do it, because you don't want to feel like, I feel like so often, right, like in our labs, like we feel like information comes down so like top down. From like peer-reviewed journals. Here's all this scientific information, like badgering you, like this is how to be. But really, what's important, I think, is like just like in Atlanta or like New York, it's been this like ground up effort, right? Like science advocacy looks so different, really about what your communities are interested in and want to see represented, and that can really be an effective way to communicate with like our legislators who are not like not going to just like stab you in the eye. They're not. Hear from this. Like, yeah, we voted them in, and we have the power to, to let them know what we're thinking about.
Right. And, and it's really important to get that going and make it low key. And it's very important to keep it local, right? Because we're in Georgia. Yeah. So if we mention climate change, we've instantly alienated half our audience, right? And that's not helpful, right? And so why don't we just talk about like, let's clean up the water, right? Because even super conservative people are like, oh, I need water to drink, right? So like we can clean up the water because it's going to affect your health and it's going to affect our agriculture, which is like a huge thing here in Georgia and stuff like that. And then I don't have to mention climate change, but if we clean up the water and we fix illegal dumping and we do a bunch of things, like we're helping, right? And we're making incremental process, and then I don't have to turn the audience off from like, and they're not like, oh, you crazy hippies, right? Like they're like, oh, okay. Like we had, and there was something going on with like illegal dumping, and we got some farmers to come to the Capitol, and this is the best quote ever. This guy was like, I don't really like these hippies, but this is my land, and I agree with it. I was like, Yes, right? Like,
your protector limit.
he was like, you guys, I wouldn't hang out with these people or drink a beer with them. They're not my type, but like, they're ruining my land, which is how I make my business, and we can't be doing this. And I was like, dude, I'll take it.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I'm definitely going to link you. The Catherine Halo talk that I was referencing, because she also framed it in a similar way. Whereas, like, we actually don't have to talk about climate change in the way that we do. We just need to talk about it's like a labor issue, it's an agriculture issue, it's a water cleanliness issue. I think that's so important to like really understand. And I love that. That's such a great example of like, you don't have to agree about everything. You don't have to call it the same thing, but we care about the same issues, right? Our own safety, our own health, all of this is important. It's just about framing that conversation. You have to tell us more about the environmental justice work that Cypher-G has been doing. I know that you have a water hunt going on, like a hybrid.
So this is like our fun event, right? So we do like a bunch of, but so what we did is we got together with 12 organizations around Georgia that are all involved in water, and like river keepers and things like that. And then we made 12 stops all around Georgia to kind of show that the headwaters of the Chattahoochee does then flow through Atlanta, and the Chattahoochee River is the water source for Atlanta, right? So hey, we should pay attention. And then, but then like, where does the runoff go? And and it goes to these swamps and out through the farmland and things like that. And so we have 12 stops all around, so people can understand that, hey, it's not just flowing through my backyard. Like, we're all in this together as Georgians. And so we got a bunch of information from all the stops. And so because it's weird and because we want it accessible to everyone, because 2021 is just as weird as 2020 or so far, we put it all online, right? So you can go and learn about all 12 of them online at our scavenger hunt. And then, but we also have information. Like, if you want to go hike to the headwaters of the Chattahoochee, like, we have a link to the trail, so you can, like, it's like a 4-mile hike, right? So yeah, and like, somebody cleaned up the Satilla River, so they were like, this is the best place to visit the Satilla River, or like, here's how to visit the Okefenokee Swamp. These are all real places, by the way. Whenever I say like multiple
just like an online map, it's just like
no, we have an intern from Ohio, and she's like, I think you're just making all these words up, and I'm like, no, it's a real place. So that's all online, and it's running the whole summer, so we're really excited about it. So this is, again, like a low-key way to learn about science, but like, it's not heavy. It's just like, here's water and here's what it does. And, but, all these organizations had like some cool videos on like, here's the amount of fresh water that's available to us, and here's how pollutants get into the water and things like that. So you can sort of learn how what you do in your everyday life can affect our drinking water or our crops. So yeah, it's cool.
Yeah, I love this a lot. I have a friend who always refers to like Earth Week and these like nature-related events that happen during April as like kind of like a gateway drug into environmentalism. And I feel like this is a perfect example. Like, I'm looking for a hike to trail, like a trail to hike. I get there, I learn some science. Oh, this is like the water that I'm drinking. And only go in the way that we hope. But that's beautiful. I feel like that's amazing.
Thanks.
Yeah, and I love that the connection to all the local water groups. Like, we also work really closely with our River Keeper group here in New York City. I feel like those environmental groups, they just have a real understanding of that relationship to science and nature and the self. That's so like, I feel like once you have that personal relationship, it's hard not to think about it and hard not to bring it to, even when you're just like loading a cup of coffee like into your
right. Like, well, and it's interesting to point out that it's like, I'm on the municipal water supply, and we take good care of it, and so I can get water out of the tap, right? But in Georgia, there's a lot of people on well water, and that's not regulated. So like, what's coming out of their tap? And if the coal ash plant is really close to you, like, what's seeping into your groundwater and things like that. So just kind of reminding people that, yeah, here in the city, I mean, unless, well, Flint didn't go so well, but like, in general, right, like, tap water is a highly regulated thing that we can trust right? And so what if it goes sideways, or what if we're not on tap water? Like, what if we're on well water, and things like that?
Yeah, definitely, definitely. What are some advice that you give folks who want to advocate for their clean water, for example, or want to get involved with science advocacy? Where can they start?
I think the best place for them to start is, well, one, if they're looking for advice, they should reach out to Science for Georgia, or they should reach out to March for Science, or like an organization that already does it, because like whenever somebody's like, I want to advocate and I want to do it well, like we're super excited to help them and offer them advice and tips and tricks and how to's, and right, like, don't write your senator like a 12-page diatribe, right? Like, you're just going to go on the crazy pants file, right? Like, keep it short and sweet and to the point. And then also, like, if you want to advocate, make it personal, like figure out why it matters to you, because if you go talk to your neighbor about like the water supply, and it's your backyard water supply, obviously it's important to you, it's important to your neighbor, like you can make a connection. Whereas if you just go to your neighbor and rail about bleaching of the coral reef in Australia, while awful and terrible, and we all want that to stop, like that doesn't affect your neighbor on a daily basis, right? Like they may be like, well, crap, maybe I won't vacation there next year, but like there's no connection, right? So like if you're going to advocate for things in your community and advocate for things in your state, because then that's also like, we were talking to a representative about this and she was like, oh, this is going to affect property values, right? And I didn't even think about that, right? Like, and I was like, yeah, what a good point, right? Like she was a real estate agent and she's like, well, I don't want property values to go down in my district. And it was like, okay, that's the connection, right? Like, who cares about the sea turtles dying or like whatever, like really right? So whatever. So if you start talking about it in your backyard, people make the connection like, oh, this is going to affect me personally. And then it's a lot easier to start advocating and like starting a conversation.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's so true, especially the note about like finding a group of people, even if it's just like another friend or a group of friends that decide to like go to a Science for Georgia event together and kind of just have that camaraderie among you. I think that really helps to like build that, like someone's individual voice into a big collective action is something that like we at March for Science really champion, because it is how we can really like have a like one true like voice coming forward and everything. And then these efforts scale up, right? If someone from Australia is talking about what's going on, if someone from Georgia is talking about what's going on, then that's how we can really have a global conversation in a way with our elected officials through our votes, as we know, through letter writing, through all of this. So that's all great. Okay, I think we are running out of time, but Amy, it was so nice getting to know you, and I'm definitely, yes, going to send you Catherine Hayhoe's talk, and we're going to talk about beer brewing at some point. I promise you. Maybe cross stitching too. That could be fun. So before I let you go, how can people reach you? How can people find Science for Georgia?
Yeah, the best way to find us is on our website. So that's just scienceforgeorgia.org. So the word science, forgeorgia.org. So it's pretty, well, unless I have trouble spelling. So good luck to you. But yeah, so that's the best way to find it.
We will put the link up for anyone who needs help.
There's like contact information for us there. There's a link right on the main page to the scavenger hunt, and then they can find like our how-to guides on how to get involved and how to ramp up your advocacy as you want to.
Amazing. Sounds great. Well, thank you again, Amy, and thank you so much for all the work that Science for Georgia has been doing, and happy Earth Week.
Happy Earth Week. Thank you so much. This was such a pleasure. I'm so glad I could participate. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.